Okay, we are 10:02. Good morning, welcome councillors, officers and members of the public to the meeting of the planning committee. Reminder to switch your mobile phones off or to silent. There are members of the public and press attending this meeting virtually. Please ask those attending virtually to switch off your microphone to avoid any disruption during the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available in due course on the council's YouTube channel. We have toilets located at either end of the building. There is no fire alarm, and therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please leave the building immediately by the nearest exit and gather at the assembly point, which is located in the car park to the side of the main entrance, beside the bins. Members of the public who are registered to speak will be invited to use the microphone to the person who will have up to 3 minutes. If you're approaching the 3 minutes, I'll try and get your attention. To ensure that those attending virtually can hear proceedings for the recording to capture the entire meeting, please ensure that you wait for the microphone to speak clearly into the microphone. It should all be working perfectly well now, and I'm assuming you can all hear me. Thank you. Please remember it's a formal meeting and we do not refer to councillors or officers by their first names. My name is Councillor Kevin Davies, and before we come to the agenda, I would ask our officers to introduce themselves from my left.
David Jeffrey, Senior Planning Officer.
Morning, Tracy Blackmore, Planning Manager.
Morning, Beverly Triggs, Clerk of the Meeting.
Morning, Hannah Pettifer, Legal Officer today.
Fergus Pate, Highways Development at County Council.
Good morning, Young Development Management Officer, Forest and North Devon.
Matthew Brown, Legal Planning Officer, North Devonshire Council.
Thank you. So that brings us to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. I believe we have apologies.
Yes, Chair, received apologies from Councillors Bishop, Flood, Coombs, Hayworth Booth, Prowse, Spear and Whitehead, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2 to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of September 2025, pages 9 to 20 of your report. Are you moving? Yes or no?
Happy to session.
Seconded by Councillor Lever. So all in favour, please? Everyone? Thank you very much. Item 3, items brought forward which in the opinion of the chair should be considered by the meeting as a matter of urgency. Just 2 things really, and both regarding training. Thank you very much for everyone attending the training that we held at Bridgeway. I thought that was very informative. And to remind you that we will continue the bite-sized training before committee, just a 15-minute bite-size. If anyone has a suggestion of something they would like to be covered, please email me or Tracy or both of us. We did discuss BNG, but BNG is something that can't really provide any further clarification of the existing situation. If that changes, we'll capture that later on. So if there's anything on the NPPF or supplementary planning guidance, just please let me know. Item 4 is declarations of interest. Do you have declarations?
We do, Chair, with the following declarations of interest. Councillor Levy has declared a disclosable pecuniary interest in application 80168. And Councillor Lever has declared a disclosable pecuniary interest in application 80748, Chair.
Thank you. So item 5 is to agree the agenda between part A and part B. We do not have a part B, so we'll move straight to part A. So item 6 is application number 79684, land of, I'm not sure if I pronounce this right, is it Tyneville or Tinnever? Tinnever Road, Chivnor, Devon, for the erection of a six-bed care home. And I will hand over to our officer for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Application 79684.
Chair, would it be possible for the back door to be closed, so it's slightly less loud?
Yes, it will.
Go and shut it. Sorry,
Yeah, good idea.
I've struggled hearing it first.
Seems to be a monthly occurrence on Wednesday.
Weekly.
It's on Tuesday.
Yes.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so the application's for a 66-bed care home. It's in use class C2. And the application also covers associated access, car parking, landscaping, and ancillary buildings. Before I begin, I'd like to provide an update to members to please disregard all references to the Braunton Neighbourhood Plan, which are included in the officer's report because it falls outside of the neighbourhood plan area. So the site itself, shown on the location plan, it's just over half a hectare in size. It's a vacant parcel of land allocated for employment use, located off Tinnever Road to the south of A361, just north of RMB Chivnor. You can see the site here on the aerial plan. It's, as I said, it's within, but on the edge of an allocated employment site. It's located adjacent to an area of public open space to the east, which serves residential development located off Meadowland Road. Down to the northwest has already been developed for employment sites, and there's a park and ride which has been built out but is not yet in use to the north of the site. This slide shows the site allocation policy. It's allocated under the RA01. It's part of a wider mixed-use allocation with land to the east, earmarked for residential development, which has now been completed. The allocation was subsequently covered by a hotline permission. So this provided a vision for the development of the wider sites. It was accompanied by a set of parameter plans, which indicated the manner in which the site was developed. As can be seen from the parameters plan here, it shows the residential components of the site to the east, and a mix of employment uses within use classes B1, B2, and B8, as well as the park and ride, and an allowance was made for a mixed use hub within the site. So the site itself was indicated for class B1 use as part of the outline application. And this was covered by condition 7 of the application, which said it would be developed in broad accordance with these principles set out in the parameters plans. A second parameters plan, which was a good part of the outline permission, indicates a broad idea of building heights across the site. Also, it shows the site, the application site itself would include 2- and 3-story development. Some site photos here. The photos taken from the site looking back towards residential development on Meadowland Road. Photos at the top looking back across the site towards the constructed employment units to the northwest. substation located to the northern edge of the site. I've also taken some photos from Heaton Hill so you can see the site in context. So you can see in the background all the buildings associated with R&D Chivena, the employment buildings to the east, and the existing residential development located on Tinnever Road. This is the proposed site plan. Shows that the zone is located towards the eastern side of the site, with parking tucked in to the western side. Proposed elevations show a 3-story development with two wings of mainly residential accommodation located on a central core containing communal facilities. Those floor plans, again showing the 3 floors of accommodation and mix of communal facilities. Also give some site sections. These were requested from the agent to more clearly show the relationship between the proposed development and the existing dwellings located off Meadowland Road. A series of 3 perspectives were submitted alongside the application to get a better sense of the development and its design. There's a view from Meadowland Road, looking into the site of Tinnever Road. So also I'd like to draw members' attention to a certain amount of negotiation which has happened throughout the course of the application. As it was originally submitted, it included a flat roof design, a much more simple set of elevations. So I've included a couple comparisons here for your benefit to see how we've negotiated a different design. So it's comparing the view here, looking in from Tinnever Road before about the final design and as submitted originally. So I'm looking across the public open space, Meadowland Road. Include the surface water drainage strategy plan here. The submitted drainage strategy and infiltration testing that's taken on site showed that infiltration wasn't possible on site. So attenuation tanks have been provided to the northeast of the site, along with some pipe storage and permeable parking areas. Surface water would be discharged to a ditch running along the sort of southwest of the site, and then which would find its way to a local water course. So I'll provide a summary of the main planning considerations in assessing the application. And I'll talk you through a sort of a basic assessment of the application under these headings. As I've said, the site is allocated for use as an employment site. There is a degree of conflict with that outline permission in that condition 7 indicated that the site should be used for B1 employment use. The proposed use as a care home C2 doesn't strictly fit this definition, but it's clear that it will generate a significant amount of employment. The application suggests that it will provide in excess of 50 full-time jobs on the site. And it is also noted that it is on the edge of this allocated employment site next to existing residential uses. So it can be seen as acting as a transition between the residential use and the wider employment site. The council's economic development team have been consulted, and they've recognised the potential employment generation on the site and support the application. There is no conflict with the local development plans policies which seek to safeguard employment land. It's recognised that the site has been vacant for some time, as well as other employment land to the west. And it's generally seen as the proposed use is seen as being compatible in general with neighbouring uses. There is support for the application under policy ST17-2, which relates to specialist housing accommodation. The proposals will clearly meet identified need in the area. This is supported by the council's HEDNA, and it's seen as being in a sustainable location, which is compatible with this context. And in terms of the principle of development, any conflict with the outline permission is generally seen as being outweighed by the benefits of bringing this allocated employment site into an active employment generating use. In going back to the design, which has been a key issue in assessing and negotiating this application, is recognised that any design here does have to mark the transition between employment and residential uses. It has to also meet the operational needs of the care home provider. The applicant has a large portfolio of different care home developments. It's that's around 250 different sites. And it's been designed to meet their operational needs. One of the key issues we looked at coming in was whether the sort of height and massing of the building was appropriate. As I covered earlier on, there was a parameter plan which was conditioned as part of the original outline permission. The building heights proposed here are well within the sort of maximum building heights suggested as part of the outline permission. And I think it's been important that the design is evolved to include pitched roofs, which is generally sort of much more appropriate to the setting of the residential and commercial buildings in the area. The elevations have been amended to be treated much more sensitively with to be articulated using different materials and steps in the elevation, which have broken up the massing of the building compared to the original scheme. On balance, officers consider that the design of the site to be acceptable. In terms of residential amenity, there's a 45-metre gap between the care home and neighbouring properties. We don't see there to be any significant impacts on neighbours in terms of outlook, daylight or privacy. Environmental health have been consulted on the proposals. They sought further information on any extraction systems which were used within the building, and clarification has been sought on their specification. There aren't seen to be any impacts, any significant impacts in terms of odour or noise in that respect. and construction phase impacts would be covered by condition for requiring a construction management plan. The site is to be served by 25 parking spaces. The county highways officer has been consulted and raised no objections in this respect. The application is supported by a transport statement and travel plan, and a condition would be added to any permission requiring a updated travel plan, and the development and operation of the site would have to accord with that travel plan. So in summary, there are no highways or high-raised objections to the application as it stands. In terms of drainage, the Lee Local Flood Authority has been consulted. Amendments to the scheme were secured to provide some sustainable drainage features in terms of planters under the downpipes. A certain amount of but the key aspect of the drainage strategy in the absence of any infiltration being viable is attenuation. This would be discharged to a nearby watercourse at a controlled rate. A further condition would be used to require further details to the satisfaction of the Lee Local Flood Authority, but they have confirmed that the drainage strategy as it stands is acceptable. In terms of ecology, a wide range of ecology surveys were carried out on the site to reflect the fact that it has been vacant for some time, and it has developed. It has become quite overgrown and does contain a certain degree of ecological interest. So surveys have been carried out for great crested newts, assessments for bats and reptiles. The council's ecologist has been consulted, further information has been submitted. There are no objections on ecological grounds. Biodiversity net gain would be secured by a condition. A degree of this is indicated on the site to the south, with the remainder to be secured off-site. The council would require a BNG monitoring fee in this respect, which would need to be secured by a legal agreement if the committee were minded to approve. There are no other financial contributions to report. And in summary, the application is recommended for approval, subject to securing the BNG monitoring fee via legal agreements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have a number of speakers. First up, Daniel Hill, for the statement you read.
Chair, a statement from Daniel Hill states, the agenda report acknowledges at the outset that the site is located on a designated employment site. Also taking response from Henton Parish Council that correctly identifies the appropriate use of the site in terms of planning policy, i.e. employment uses within use classes B1, B2 and B8. Numerous representations, 50, confirm the conflict of policies relating to design, ecology and residential amenity in addition to its dismissal of the local plan strategic objectives for the development of this allocated site. The representations make it clear that as a proposed care home is neither employment development or a community facility, but is instead privately funded commercial venture. In terms of the policy conflict, the agenda reports reference to policy DM13, safeguarding employment land, as having some relevance to proposals, seriously misrepresents the clear conflict with the provisions of the adopted development plan and the fundamental circumstance that the land is designated for and should be safeguarded for employment use. A Class C2 care home is not an employment use. Should such an argument be accepted on the basis that staff are employed in running a care home, then such an argument could equally apply to many other uses such as a supermarket, school, leisure centre or similar institution, all of which provide substantial employment, but which are not B1, B2 or B8 employment uses, where the primary focus is on the delivery of light industrial, general industrial and office space. In this instance, there are no material considerations to suggest a decision other than in the council adopted planning policies. Finally, and of particular importance, the agenda report omits the required planning balance, a serious omission which is compounded by its broad conclusion that the proposal for a care home provides support from the local plan policies relating to employment and economic development. The proposal does not find such policy support, and to state otherwise is to gravely misrepresent the position as proposed is expressly contrary to policies that include policy DM13, policy ST22, policy BRA, and policy BRA01, as well as several other DM policies. It follows that the application should be refused, consistent with the requirements of S36 of the Planning Act, or at the very least deferred for reconsideration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Next, I have Stephen Crowther, please.
I'm just going to get this mic.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Good morning, councillors. Thank you for this opportunity.
If you just go a little bit closer.
Closer.
Yeah,
Is that better?
that's great.
Okay, you all know the nature of the planning commission's rather 51214 11 years ago for 150 houses, a business park, a multi-use hub, a park and ride, and a roundabout. I noticed today in the officer's report, the hub was described as allowance was made for a mixed-use hub, which I'm quite interested in. We didn't say an allowance was made for a roundabout or a park. Anyway, in the officer's report, it concludes when it's commenting about Hinton Parish Council's objection to this. It concludes with regards to the provision of a community hub. This is still covered as part of the original legal agreement covering the site under the original outline permission. Well, the current application has been submitted by a different applicant who is not subject to this agreement. Well, first of all, I'm assuming you're talking about either the S106 or the conditions. It is not mentioned in the S106 at all. Neither is it mentioned in the conditions other than in the title of the consent. And that's what it's doing applicant. The S106 is made with St Francis Group Chipner Limited and School Farm Developments. This application is from LNT Care Developments and St Francis Group Chipner Limited. It is the same applicant, not a different one. Now, the hub is not covered in the S106 legal agreement. I'm not entirely surprised because it isn't essentially an S106 benefit. It was presented as a substantive part of the outline application with equal status in that application to the employment site, to the 150 houses, to the roundabout, to the parking line. These are four of the park. They don't have quickly that has to be delivered, and the roundabout, and lots of conditions about the 150 houses and the employment site. No mention of the hub. It is one of the 5 things that was granted consent for. It's in the title. It keeps reappearing in the title of all the subsequent planning applications that have been granted onto the It is in all of the drawings that were presented by the developer when they went for the first application. Councillor Lane and I know possibly one or two other people were there at that meeting. It was a very contested, this application. So I want to know a number of things about this. It is also incidentally in the plans that are being submitted, not only for this application, but the 150 houses subsequently and a number of other phases of the development of campuses. The master plan and significant bits of plan, here is the hub drawn on.
If you
And
can,
yes,
if you can wind up, please.
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. One of two things, either the community hub was agreed in pre-application with the council as a sweetener to get this through, and has been quietly dropped, or it was volunteered by the developer and has been quietly dropped. And I have to say, I need to know which it is, because I need to tell people of 150 houses where their community hub is. And I consistently keep saying, stop giving this developer permission to develop this site when it is not living up to its original requirements.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But next I have a statement to be read for Abby Hopkins.
Thank you, Chair. She states, I wish to register a formal objection to the plan application for a 66-bedroom, three-storey care home at Land of Tinaver Road. This proposal is inappropriate for this established residential area and raises significant concerns regarding planning policy compliance, ecological impact, the opportunity for beneficial community enrichment, and local market matter. 1. Planning policy and use class compliance. I support the finding out on the review agenda report shared by Mr. Daniel Hill of Meadowland Road, which argues that the proposal does not meet the criteria for economic B1, B2, and B8. The proposal is for a care home which falls into the use class of C2 residential institutions, not the B class of definitions of business, general industrial, or storage distribution. The council must assess the application based on its actual size, so its actual use class C2, scale 66 bedrooms, 3 stories, and nature of this development are generally considered inappropriate for integration within a settled residential area due to the associated impacts on local amenity, e.g. traffic, noise, and visual bulk. 2. Ecological biodiversity impact. The proposed development site and surrounding area are known to be ecologically sensitive and home to protected species. Greater Horseshoe Bat. The areas within the known origin and commuting range of the Greater Horseshoe Bat, a species afforded to the highest level of protection. The scale of development, increased light pollution, and potential habitat fragmentation pose a significant risk. A comprehensive, up-to-date ecological survey must be mandatory to assess the impact and ensure appropriate mitigation. Great crested newt. There is potential for the presence of the great crested newt, another European protected species, due to the presence of local water bodies. Any groundworks on changes to local hydrology could detrimentally affect these species. A full survey should be required for determination. 3. Impact on residential amenity and property value. On a personal level, there is significant concern that the proposed development due to its size, bulk, increase in traffic, and change in the county street scene would have a negative and detrimental impact on any future intent to sell on property, thereby affecting its capital value. The imposition of a large institutional building is not to keep the surrounding housing stock and would fundamentally add to the residential amenity of the area. 4. Missed opportunity for community enrichment. Use of this land represents a missed opportunity to genuinely enrich the local community, given that the surrounding area, including Chibnall, is subject to significant residential development. The focus should be on providing vital, accessible community infrastructure. I question why this land cannot be used to enrich the community by entities such as a community hub for local meetings and events, cafes or spaces for local startups to foster economic activity, a decent modern children's playground to meet the needs of the growing number of families in the area. 5. Lack of demonstrated local demand. I have serious reservations about the need for 66-bedroom new build, particularly given recent local market activity. Over a short period, 3 care homes have closed in the immediate area, one of which has a capacity 60 bedrooms and has been for sale. I would like to understand why one of these existing recent closed care properties cannot be purchased and developed, refurbished, as they already have a foundation within the local area, thus avoiding environmental and amenity impacts associated with developing a greenfield or previously undeveloped site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to take a breath because I think you've got a statement for Councillor Graham Bell next.
Thank you, Chair. It states, I'm speaking with a series of concerns regarding this application. If the committee is minded to approve this application today, I hope that these matters will be addressed. This application raises serious concerns of trust, location and design, despite acknowledging the wider need for care placements across the North of Devon. 1. Inappropriate design and quality of care. The proposed 3-storey standardised block design is not in keeping with the surrounding built environment. While practical, it has a very generic and uninspired appearance. While beauty is not a material planning consideration, the committee should consider work such as Parker Barnes McKee et al. 2004 in quality of life and urban design in residential and nursing homes for older people. The material design has a significant effect on the well-being of residents and Randstad. The committee should consider paragraphs 92 to 93 of the National Planning Policy Framework regarding the need for healthy places. An office block style care home in the middle of an industrial park is not something that you desire for the later stage of your life. Evidence-based research shows that smaller household models, good daylighting and dementia-friendly layouts are consistently linked to improved health and well-being outcomes for residents and staff. Approving a standard template scheme at the census site would be a missed opportunity to develop a more beautiful human-scaled therapeutic care home. 2. Need committee infrastructure. As noted by Loughborough and Henton and Charlton Parish Council, this location has already failed to provide a community hall promised under application 55214, 2014 section 106 agreement. A facility repeatedly described in their application as central to creating a sustainable mixed-use community at Given Across. With 2 additional development facilities, the land has become a large residential area with no community value. Spread of care facilities associated with economic pressures in Braunton. While the need for modern care home places in North Devon is real and growing, especially given the closure of older facilities such as Harriet Nanscombe and Manor. However, Braunton Rural already accommodates 3 excellent care homes providing residential care. Unfortunately, the housing pressures in Braunton, along with the inadequate wages paid to care workers, means that many of the staff in existing homes are having to travel long distances to work in the care environment. Staff are routinely travelling from Bideford to work in Braunton care facilities. This 66-bed facility will require 50 to 70 full-time equivalent staff, most of whom will need to travel a significant distance to work, given the long hours worked by care staff and the fragmented bus service. This development will have a sustainability issue of both a financial, transport and environmental nature than a development in another part of the district. If the committee is minded to approve this application, I would ask that serious consideration is given to the inadequate park facilities required by a large workforce, along with the visitors for the site. The roads around Tennever are already in a poor state. This scale of development will force carers and parkers to park on the residential streets around the landings.
Thank you. You'll be pleased to know that Councillor Bell was spot on 3 minutes. Next, we have the agent, Claire Helms, please.
My name is Claire House and I'm the senior planner at L&T Development in the application. I just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce L&T and explain who we are and summarise some of the key considerations of the application. We present our application to you with the experience of building and operating over 250 care homes in communities across the UK, providing over 16,500 care bed spaces and 15,000 jobs in the care sector. With each new home providing us total of 60 full-time and part-time roles for the local workforce. We are also proud to be the market leader in elderly care development for both residential care and dementia care. The decision to develop a care home in this area of North Devon is based on a detailed analysis of the existing provision for care within the locality and the growing demand for elderly care provision and the need for a new residential care facility. The care home will very much be a local community facility and will focus on adopting strong community ties by hosting open and activity days, offering communal spaces to local community groups and facilitating engagement with nearby schools, enhancing social inclusion both within the care home and the wider community. This location was identified as suitable for a care home due to sustainable transport links, including the Tarpa Trail and nearby bus stops. The proposed parking is suitable for the operation of the care home based on our experience of operating other homes. Supporting parking surveys were submitted for some of our occupied homes to demonstrate demand functional. Features such as secure cycle shelters and staff changing facilities are also included within the staff area, which would encourage sustainable methods. We are working positively with North Devon Council to provide a building of suitable scale, design and layout to assimilate with the surrounding area. But importantly, meets the operational requirements of a residential care home. The outside space are just as important for residents as the internal amenity spaces, and the home will feature outdoor seating areas to the south and east of the site, access from both the main lounge and smaller garden lounge. Landscaping will include biodiversity species as well as ornamental planting and opportunities for residents to contribute to the gardening with raised planters. We've invested in green technologies to create a building which is highly energy efficient, with ground heat pump and solar panels proposed as renewable sources, providing up to 70% of the building's energy usage. In conclusion, the proposed development will be of benefit to the local community, providing the best level of care for people in the later stage of life, creating a place where they can enjoy and more importantly choose to live. This care home will bring a much needed care facility and employment to the area, and on balance, agreeable from a planning perspective. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Knight, we'll come to you when we ask questions, okay? You're one question. After questions, I want to go back to our officers because obviously the speakers have raised a number of issues and we might be able to get answers to some of those questions. So to remind members of the public that is the end of the public participation. So we'll go back to our officer and perhaps Tracy Blackmore, because I think we can list as we went along. Be a good idea if we can address some of the issues that were raised. I heard the hub mentioned on more than one occasion. My understanding, and please correct me, is that the hub can be delivered. There's nothing to prevent it being delivered on the further development phases. But if you can explain a little bit about that, that would be really great. We also have our highways officers here, so I think it would be good to go to them to discuss the highways and the parking. There's also a mention of planning balance and policy conflict. You've started to cover the policy conflict in your report. I don't know if you wanted to add anything on policy conflict and planning balance. Yeah, the kind of three things I picked up. You may have some more.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll start by addressing the issue of the community hub. As it was pointed out, you know, this was something which was shown as part of the outline permission. One thing I'll highlight, it wasn't actually ever part of the site allocation, so it wasn't covered under policy BR-A01 as an original part of this mixed-use development. And one thing I would say is, you know, if an application, there's nothing as part of this application which prejudices the delivery of that community hub at a later date. So, you know, that's in the hands of the landowner at the moment, and there's nothing we can really do about that as part of this application. But, you know, if and when an application does come forward on that site, whatever it's for, we'd have to consider that on its own merits. But as I say, there's nothing at the moment which prejudices the delivery of that hub in the future. In terms of policy conflicts, I'd like to point out Also, the site allocation BRA01, it specifically refers to, I think the wording was business and employment opportunities. So the allocation didn't itself specify specific use classes which would relate to the individual sites here. And, you know, as I pointed out in the report, it is an on-balance decision. There is a degree of conflict with the outline permission. But I think, as I made clear, we do have to consider that the proposed use will generate a significant amount of employment, and it is seen to be broadly compatible with this context in this instance.
I'm going to ask the members of the, if you can hear me, can I please ask that you just now listen rather than
You don't need to laugh.
chip in or laugh or whatever gestures. It's really not helpful. The committee are focusing. Thank you.
The chair mentioned issues surrounding parking and access. Now, at the time, would you mind commenting, Paul?
Thank you, Chairman, members. I think it's fair to say that this application was supported or has been supported by a robust transport statement and travel plan. We've looked at two key issues here. We've looked at one, the traffic generation, and also the actual kind of car parking demand requirements. In terms of the traffic movements associated with the development, we're broadly in alignment with the application submission, and that it demonstrates in the order of up to, say, 12 vehicle movements in the peak hour in the morning, and 14 trip movements in the peak afternoon. So in terms of traffic generation, you obviously have a development there that's a layout that's recent in terms of the last 10 years, where significant improvements have been made roundabout provision, footway connections, footway links and cycleway links. So in terms of the actual traffic generation, that ticks all the right boxes. In terms of the actual car parking demand, which I know was quite a significant issue for local residents, there's a number of key issues there to take into account in terms of looking at both travel sustainability, but also travel accessibility. And I cannot think of a better location where it ticks all of those boxes as well. You have pedestrian movements that can take place in both an existing and newly formed network of footpaths. These are well located to provide access arrangements to Rafton, Broughton, and even Barnstable beyond when you're looking at movements in terms of using cycles. The pedestrian movements can take place 200 metres to the target trail. Similarly, for cycling vision, you have the long distance target trail. And this falls within the typical parameters that we would look to provide for walking and cycling distances. In addition to that, you have a public transport network that provides services during the Monday to Friday weekly period, probably every half an hour or so. In some cases, it's a little bit less than that. Weekends, it tends to be more half an hour to hourly. And then, of course, you have good infrastructure for providing car movements to and from the site. When we look at the parking demand, we've got no approved standards in your local plan members. That was taken out some time ago, where we had prescribed standards. So you have no minimum parking standards, you have no maximum parking standards. But what you do have is historically guidance that used to provide those very standards. When I've considered those, we've probably arrived at in the order of 32 car parking spaces that would be required under the old standards. And I compare that not only with the 25 that's being provided here, but also taking into account, as I say, such a sustainable location, such an accessible location, that the movements there that could take place by walking, cycling, public transport exist. We cannot force members of the public to use those facilities, but of course, if you are looking at have been brought in to provide quite significant numbers of those staff members, then they can use the alternative to the car. So in terms, members of a provision that meets an accessible location, as I say, I would look for a better location than one that's before you. You've had a fairly robust travel plan that's been put forward as part of the travel statement. And I know that the planning authority intend to put forward a condition on any planning permission that would secure not only kind of consideration of that travel plan, but the ongoing provision of that facility. So basically, members, taking that into account, we as a highway authority find this being perfectly acceptable.
Thank you very much. Tracy Blackmore, is there anything you wish to add at this time? We're going to go into questions, or members who have questions. So thank you for that, and thank you very much for that. So we move into questions, and I hope you don't mind. I'm going to kick us off while you're pondering a bit further. Is it possible to bring up the landscape plan or the views on the landscape? Maybe on the iteration one. There was a square in the top right-hand corner. Yeah, in the north-east corner. Can you clarify what that is, please?
I have to admit, I'm not exactly sure that square is there.
You mean the black one?
Yeah, because it doesn't appear on the landscape now, so I don't know if it's underground. Maybe we can come back to that. While we're on that same plan, the building in the south-east, which I don't think is a building, is it? It shows on the aerial that there was a building there, but would look like a building, but that is pumping station.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there isn't actually a building there at all. No. The substation, one of the visions was chosen that showed the substation very clearly on both the first submission and the amended submission. Is there screening to the substation proposed, or is that visual an accurate reflection of what we're going to be looking at?
So the landscaping plan here does indicate screening on the inside of the site, but the substation land is actually outside of control of the applicant.
Thank you very much for that. That was mine, so I'm going to go to members for questions. Councillor Lever.
Thank you. So I read the report and thought about it quite a lot. I listened to representations that have been made and officer reports. And I have to say I'm somewhat mystified, particularly on the parking provision point of view, and I would be grateful if we could have perhaps more of an explanation, or perhaps Officer Paul, could you provide us with a bit more detailed explanation about the assessment of the 26 places being sufficiently for a 66 room place for 66 people to live, and the staff and presumably visitors to, we hope that all these people have got visitors coming. And because of the nature of this proposal for more elderly people, this is, I suppose, a question not for you, but not for this question is, would it be reasonable to assume that quite a lot of visitors may not be in the flush of health and youth? As you mentioned Barnstable, on Google Maps, it's mile 37 walking from that site to the Barnstable, to the centre of Barnstable. So in terms of, I understand what you mean in terms of the sustainability, in terms of, yes, people on their bikes and getting buses and so on and so forth. But I wonder if you could just really explain in considerably more detail how 26 car parking spaces is actually appropriate for development of this size. Sorry, 25 spaces, sorry.
So Paul, if you're happy to offer a little bit more insight into that, you've already stated that we don't have parking standards and you've given us the movements. And we've also heard from Councillor Graham Bell about the amount of staff arriving. So if you cover that, and that's interesting in terms of employment, the number of staff, there's a benefit and also a risk in terms of movement. So if you can.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this is why it's particularly useful to have regard to the own historic parking standards, which often gives us a good benchmark on typically what parking we would still be looking for. I think in terms of the flexibility now that you have with no rigid parking standard in place in the local plan, it's also a factor to take into account. If I actually refer you to, say, the old historic standard, then that used to exist in the, I think it was removed effectively in the 1990s. That parking standard was specifically identified in nursing homes and residential homes in the order of 1 parking space per 8 residents. So that's how we start off arriving at in the order of 8 spaces, particularly for the residents themselves. What you have to obviously bear in mind is that those standards were evoked not just for any resident need as such, but also staff, nurses, doctors, phlebotomists, and all the other kind of staff members that may be employed there. So what we've done is taken the 8 spaces that would be required for residents. Worst case scenario, if you're looking in the order of, say, 24 members of staff, in operation at any one time. So whilst I appreciate there's in the order of up to say 50 staff that would be employed, I think the indications are in the report that in the order of 24 staff members would be employed. Worst case scenario, if they all drove to that site, that's when we would look at 32 spaces. I think it's reasonable to assume that not everyone will drive to the site, or if they do, that there will be an element of car sharing that could take place. I think by its very nature, a lot of the staff may well be taken from the area of Rafton and Broadman. I think it's also useful to consider that if Barnstable was considered a sustainable location for staff to also take their movements from, then it's still within a reasonable cycling distance of Barnstable as an added benefit. I think also what we need to take into account is that we have a very good frequent bus service here as well. So in terms of looking at the priorities, yes, our preference is to first look at pedestrian movements. Secondly, is to look at cycling movement. Thirdly, I think with the public transport things are. And finally, looking at the private car. In this day and age, private car probably be the worst case scenario. We don't want to be car dependent. But to me, this is where it is an accessible location, a sustainable location for all those transport. If you disregard the historic parking standard, then you are into a flexible approach as to a case-by-case basis. To me, you have quite a good level of operational parking there. And I would have thought with all those other facilities in place, that's why we have the highway parking when this is being acceptable, both in accessible terms and travel sustainability terms.
Thank you. Just been reminded there is a condition regarding a travel condition. So very difficult to be absolutely precise about how all the users will drive work, but there obviously needs to be some management from the operator to make sure that's as smooth as possible. In terms of the demographic of visitors, I don't know the answer to that, but I would imagine it's potentially offspring and family members and friends, so not necessarily restricted in terms of public transport or car sharing and the like, but Tracy Blackmore's going to add something.
Sorry, I just thought it'd be useful, members, to come back on parking standards. So you're aware we haven't got parking standards in our local plan. We did in the last one, we haven't in this one, but we have got a parking provision policy in the local plan, so DM06. So if I read that policy, so development proposals will be expected to provide an appropriate scale and range of parking provision to meet anticipated needs, specifically having regard to accessibility and sustainability of the site, availability of public transport, provision of safe walking and cycle routes, and specific scales and mix of development. Proposal must encourage the use of sustainable modes of transport with careful design, layout, and integration. So as Mr. Young has been saying, obviously in terms of that no objection, if he has looked at the site in terms of the availability of public transport and the accessibility and sustainability of the site, to then sort of says to us there is no objection and he would have looked at having policy. Okay, so that might be a little bit more guidance on parking policy.
One more question, then Councillor Lee.
So, thank you. I wonder if we could get them sitting back to the 3D representation with a person with a very happy dog and a bit of space there, you know. So am I right in thinking that the majority of that green space in that slide is not part of the site, but is the space which is currently open space? And in terms of the provision of gardens and open space around the proposal, it was mentioned it was to the south and the east. And looking at the layout, I suppose it's the landscaping one, it's really unclear to me how, you know, what provision there actually is for residents to go sit out in the sun, for example, with a building or with a space where they can be sitting in the shade in the afternoon. I wondered if you could just clarify all of that for me, please.
Thank you. The site, you know, as you can see here, sort of the remainders of the sort of public open space around the building itself are on the eastern edge of the site, adjacent to that public open space. There's a balcony on the western side, communal balcony, which links through into the communal space, which faces west. But yes, the majority of public open space is to the, or the communal space for use of residents is to the east. It has areas of paved areas and gardens. And you know, it's reasonable to expect that residents will benefit from the proximity to the public open space to the east also.
I think I saw Councillor Lane nodding his head on that plan. It would appear that that visual is taken from that public space outside of the site with the path in the foreground and the hedge. So they're benefiting from that public open space in terms of the contents and setting of the proposed building. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah. So can I just sorry, thank you. To clarify that, looking at the proposed site plan, which you've got up there appear to be no breaks in that hedgerow. So in terms of residents getting from that home and taking advantage of public open space, how physically would they get there? What would the route be?
They would have to walk along the pavement on the frontage of the site to access it, because it is the site is secure to the east along that public open space, which is one of the operational requirements that the developer has, I believe.
That's visual amenity. Are there any other questions from members? Otherwise, we will. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Jim. I do follow on a bit with the amount of parking, but I do actually see the point you're making as well. Now, you talk about is the nursing home, but and you got any other self-contained facilities? Is there some of them where they look after themselves, or is it completely a part of a nursing home? Because I believe Swinbridge Nursing Home got some units which is like self-contained, which is separate. And then I question is then if they're self-contained and they're separate, is there a tendency that they could actually be driving vehicles as well? And how many is it? It could be if this self-contained.
So there's a distinction in these types of facilities. They can be delivered for people with various degrees of care need, basically. And I think that the distinction is between an extra care facility where residents would have be more self-contained. They might have a small kitchenette, for example, and would come and go more often, and a care home which falls in C2 use class, as this does, where they can just have an ensuite bedroom and they have full use of the communal facilities and are cared for, etc. And that's the case in this instance. So the units for each resident aren't self-contained.
Yeah, no, that's good. Okay, thank you. And I think going back to when about the travel plan, I think it would be helpful with the above, yeah, and helpful with maybe we've seen that in the past, but one which we say that you've provided, but in your report it says that when transport statement and travel plan has been submitted, then when you turn over the next page, it says that a condition requiring the submission of a transport plan is considered included, which I believe you mentioned is in as a condition anyhow.
Yeah, so a travel plan has been submitted as part of the application, but given the concerns raised by the letters of objection around parking and access to the site, I thought it was prudent to have a revised travel plan submitted, which can then be discussed and modified as necessary through consultation with Mr. Young.
Thank you. There's also mentioned in here the B&G monitoring fee. As you mentioned that earlier about that we tried was a condition with it as part of the plan.
That has to be secured by legal agreement. So, the recommendation today is for approval subject to securing that B&G monitoring fee by an appropriate legal agreement. So it'll be over to the council's legal team to do that.
And the last one is about the CEO within your plan and details about there's pitch, I believe running around the site or pitch running around the site, which am I assuming that's a water course or not? Is it within the site, I was saying there's no infiltration within the site? I'm just wondering how is it, and reading the report, of course, you're talking about not being able to go into the combined fire and storage system. So I'm just wondering, is there any conditions just to just to clarify that point, because you've got a lot of runoff of these routes and of the parking area, which you say is I think you define it as infiltration. But in actual fact, it can't run away, I believe, there is no point of an infiltration parking. And I'm just wondering, there is a large area which is runoff of rainwater and can be conditioned to make it acceptable further down the line, which is storm drain or water course. That's all, thank you.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the drainage strategy, you're absolutely correct that infiltration isn't viable on the site. So in terms of devising the drainage strategy, it takes the next step down the drainage hierarchy. And we do have to look at on-site attenuation here. So the parking itself, it's not planned to use infiltration, it's permeable. So the parking itself is permeable, but it has catchment pipes underneath. So that then takes the water into the drainage system serving the site. The primary means of dealing with surface on the site is through attenuation. Attenuation tanks have been sized relative to the impermeable area which will be on the site after it's developed. And sort of the things that are shown there in the northeast edge of the site. But, the infrastructure which has gone into the site as it was developed out, as the roads were put in, as the residential estate was put in, was basically allowing for these later phases of employment development. So there's actually a drainage easement which runs along the southeast corner. It's shown in yellow on the plan here. So basically there'd be attenuation on site to store that runoff and discharge slowly to that existing outfall, which does lead to a ditch to the southwest of the site into a watercourse. So the lead local flood authority have had a lot of involvement in this scheme, and they have no objections, and the principles and how the site is drained are sort of in accordance with the principles established as part of the Outline Commission. But there is the opportunity there, because we are requiring final drainage details for the lead local flood authority to have extra oversight to make sure they're happy with the specific details of each drainage feature on the site. We've included a few sustainable drainage features as through the course of the application. So as I say, the lead local flood authority have got no objections to the drainage strategy proposed.
Thank you, Councillor Lander. Councillor Walker.
Just following up on Councillor Lane's first point, could you show the floor plans, please? So I just wanted to check that what I presumed was right. Thank you.
The plans have answered your question. I believe the black box on the site layout is shown as a substation. Is that correct? Is it one to be removed and doesn't appear on the landscaping, or?
It isn't shown on the proposed site. It is shown there on the drainage strategy. So I have to admit it hasn't been assessed as part of the proposal.
We'll need some clarity on that if it's possible. Yeah.
Okay.
And I've got one last one. We've got an application for 66 rooms. Where have I seen that it's specified whether they're single occupancy or some maybe dual occupancy? And in terms of the recommended gross internal area for each room, there are slightly different requirements. Do we know if they are all single occupancy at this stage, or would that be something that is conditioned, or is the onus on the provider to make sure they fulfil that criteria?
In terms of the space standards, all the rooms do appear to be indicated as single occupancy, and the space standards, as you've picked up, are in the range of 12 meters, which is what would be expected. So, I guess that would be down to the decisions of the operator later on. Yeah.
So I don't see any more hands up. So I'm going to hand to Councillor Knight. You called in the application to committee, and the wording states so that the committee can fully consider the traffic, environmental impact, loss of amenity for residents and scale of development. Obviously you may wish to add other things, but over to you.
Thank you, Chair. You did suggest to me that if I had a question, I could wait until now. I do have a question.
The floor is all yours, Councillor.
Thank you. Yeah, it's for Mr. Young, excuse me, sir. With regard to traffic, it's slightly different from the question before about parking, which is I'm more happy with. It's the state of the road. Now, I know you know about this, but there is an ongoing sore for Hampton Bunchard Parish Council that it stated that the road accessing this development and of course the industrial site beyond, and in terms of the way it works, I know you have an answer, but I'd like to hear it again because it really is the most dangerous road for cars, pedestrians, well, not pedestrians, but certainly cyclists. Yeah, that's a question, sir.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chairman. I am aware, obviously, it's an ongoing issue, which is not unusual necessarily with both our residential and commercial estate developments. There are Section 38 agreements in place for adoption of those roads. And sometimes these processes do take a long time before we get to the stage where we have to formally consider falling in a bond to execute those works ourselves effectively. I understand that my agreement officer colleagues have been in discussions with the developer on more than one occasion. I believe in time have been fixed to finalise those works. Certainly after the conclusion of this meeting, I'm happy to go back to my agreement officer colleagues to see where we are, to establish what work needs to be done to pull the road up to a satisfactory standard and the timescales involved. Of course, I'm happy to call you in separately on that process as well. That helps. But just to confirm, Chairman, we are aware of those ongoing issues. I think that's slightly separate, of course, to the planning applications being considered tonight. But I'm certainly happy to progress that, like I say, on conclusion of this meeting.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Knight.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Paul. Mr. Young. Yeah, as soon as possible, really. This year, we certainly hope so. So definitely will affect the construction. Okay. Yes, I did call it for this application on behalf of the Parish Council and also on behalf of many approaches to me from members of the public, about which I said nothing. I can't say anything. I just got to listen. Look and learn, as it were. I've read this robust report and I commend the officer for his hard work, especially the conditions, which are vitally important. We got 10 pages of conditions, and the sustainability officer report, preliminary ecological assessment, would be, I'm relieved and happy about that. That refers a little bit to what the Parish Council points made by the Parish Council on biodiversity on page 35. Now, BAG, part of my portfolio, is extremely complex, as the Chair alluded to at the beginning of this meeting. And as soon as you had an update, you had to be updated again. There's pages and pages of it. Your initial response to the applicants pointed out exactly where you wanted them to go, as it were. We came back with a very long and robust report, which I confirm as a member of the public, along with human being, I find extremely difficult to understand. I suppose part of me wants to know that BNG will be, as you said, and as I don't know if you wanted proposals from the committee, but certainly I very much want the legal team to make sure that that's something delivered, as it were, over the next 10 years. Monitoring, very important, because people have quite a negative attitude to BNG being delivered because they don't know how it's being delivered and monitored. I'm sure it is, but say there's an element of mistrust there. I would like as much as possible to be on site. We saw this is a pretty much a wasteland, although I take exception to the fact that without anybody knowing how huge swathe of land was, you know, taken about this was put up with before anyone gave them permission. Job done too late, as it were, but that was a little bit gave bad press to the constructors. But a little bit of BNG offsite is inevitable because of the gardens extension on what was previously just scrubland. I'd love it to be on site somewhere or locally. That's a wish of all of us and make it difficult to deliver. I will refer to the response from my colleague, Councillor Bell, because we work together for Henton and Child in that division. I consider personally, professionally, if you like, the design to be much improved. Visibly, you can see the improvement. And I appreciate very much the ecological aspects of it that the applicants provided earlier. And also on our documentation here. I also am happy, or what I wanted to say about the words the chair of Henton Punchard Parish Council had said about the hub, the word that it's like it's almost like this is a Trojan horse opportunity for Henton Punchard Parish Council to say that this is on the agenda every month and no progress ever since I joined Anyhow and Fire. The thing about Tudor is that it's not just an ever-increasing community, it's actually a small town in many respects, and it's going to get bigger. And there are hardly any amenities and facilities there. I'm not referring specifically to the care home at the moment, but I am pointing out exactly why I brought this proposal in, because it gave an opportunity to make again reference to the fact that, well, not just Hinton, but also Ashford, or certainly Chivington, there are not really any facilities there for the community. And we were hoping this would be a great opportunity. I know there are things in the pipeline to the north of this application, and I await with bated breath as to what we can do about that. But I just want to reiterate the concern and the, if you like, the great wish of the local community to have a community hub, because there's nothing at the moment. So, with regard to employment, again, referring to Chidden as an ever-increasing community, I can only imagine there would be a significant number of individuals in that community that would look upon the job opportunities offered within walking distance as a real positive. These are my feelings about that aspect. I mean, I don't know about advancing years, how can you get there other than by car? But I cycled to Portland for 12 years for my job, and still do at the advanced stage of so I do think it's a very much accessible by alternative means other than motor car, and I don't think we should, well, personally, I don't think we should give priority to the motor car. So traffic and environmental impact. Well, as I said, I find the preliminary ecological assessment very much acceptable. As for loss of amenity, well, if the care home was instead going to be an industrial unit, I can't really imagine it being aesthetically more pleasing than the care home facing the residents on that. Well, you can already see what it looks like on the Tudor base, and also industrial estate from the photography we've seen, photos we've seen. And I consider the scale of development in terms of the four things that you mentioned, Chair, and the scale of development to be appropriate. I would refer to the BNG, the informative, as being very complex, but one has to, in a sense, trust in the guidelines. Yeah, I think that would be, thank you, that my comments, I might come back.
You want me to come back? Just do the BNG.
That was just going to clarify the BNG, because my understanding was there's a 30-year.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So the BNG agreement, it would be a 30-year, and it would be secured by the agreement.
And yeah, I'm going to add to that, because interestingly, I was negotiating with the BNG provider yesterday. And they would always try and offer up comparable land as a priority, as neighbourly as possible. Now, I don't know where the BNG land banks are in the southwest or in that locality, but they must look for similar, and it will be degraded land, otherwise you can't put in biodiversity again.
Yeah.
So it should be similar in terms of location and time. It's my understanding of it.
Yeah.
In the application, the applicants will negotiate with their provider to achieve that.
Yeah.
Before we come to Councillor Lane, I think it was interesting that you've been through each point on that, Colin, and some of the answers were given earlier in questions and also elaborated on. So you know the area, you're dealing with the residents, it's your ward, so it's good to get your thoughts on that. That's really very helpful. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, listen to the debate and that, and the thing is, looking at what I can see here now, we're looking at it, which I believe is a good scheme on balance. And with the community space attached to it, basically in a sustainable location, which has been highlighted. And we do need a mix of housing in both them, and I think this is going to achieve some of that, going towards that. And also, the reality is this company will be trying to provide some residential housing for the elderly if there is a need. So I can see that there is a need, otherwise it would be provided. It is adjacent to existing housing, and they will provide another 66 units for people who, in the later life, so to speak. So I'm quite happy to recommend approval. I said it as part of the plan, as possible, please, Chairman.
I'll look for a seconder for that. So that's seconded by Councillor Lethby. Did you want to add anything, Councillor Lethby, at this stage? Okay, thank you. Other hands, I don't see them. So I just want to add a little bit. Thank you, Councillor Lane, for that. It's good to hear that there has been an evolution. I think that's a really good step in the process of the planning application. And hearing from Councillor Knight that he appreciates that, and it's a better design now than it was previously. It's really good. I just want to refer, if I may, to the care inspectorate document that I've been looking at in terms of, I'm not sure entirely its status, but I believe there's an advisory body with codes that care should try and comply with. I don't know if it's statutory or not. But I picked up the section, it's actually section 5.9, which talks about outdoor facilities. I won't read it all to you, but it emphasises what Councillor Bell was referring to in terms of the well-being of people that are living there, the access to green space, fresh air, and outdoor space. there's a paragraph that says there should be outdoor space accessible from each small group setting. So that could be interpreted as each level perhaps, and there are the breakout areas within the building with some limited external space. And it then talks about external balconies over 8 square metres are considered rooms and this should be considered as a construction phase. And outdoor space being independently accessible for all people living in the care service. Obviously, there's lifts in the building, so it's a fully accessible solution that's been provided. I think there are very good things about the design in terms of its orientation, the east and the west. Whether you're a morning person, you could be on the east and the west and enjoy the evening sun. I'm just wondering whether there's an opportunity in terms of the articulation of the building, whether any recesses or balconies were considered while you've been having your talks, or whether that's something that could be reflected on, or whether there's a specific reason why they haven't been included. And I think about that because if I am in that care home at a later date, I would really like to walk out to a balcony and tend to my herbs and plants and just be in my own external outdoor space. Is that something that's been considered and whether people consider that that's something that could be improved on perhaps in terms of more greenery to break up the mass of the building as well as the materials that have been introduced? Some feedback on that.
Okay, thank you, Chair. There is one area, communal balcony, located above the reception area, first floor, which is accessed from one of the breakout areas. And whilst the private rooms themselves don't have any provision of balconies, there is, like within the bay, there's a glazed bay window to the end of each floor. Also, I know it doesn't qualify as outdoor space as such, where I guess you'd have house plants in there. But this issue of balconies is something actually I did raise a question with the agent. I note actually looking through their portfolio on their website, it's not something that they commonly provide or seem to provide from images on their website. And the agent also said that they don't consider them something that they like in terms of health and safety. That they have operational reasons for not providing balconies. But it would certainly be something we'd be looking for if these were self-contained units. Thank you.
Thank you. It's an interesting building typology of care, isn't it? Because you have vulnerable people that you want to look after to the best of your ability, and the provider that's their ambition, and I'm sure it is. And it's great to see that they are publicly accessible areas. Does anyone wish to add anything on that? Councillor Lieber?
We are in debate.
We are. Good. And we have Councillor Lynn Main has moved the recommendation, seconded by Councillor Lethby.
Thank you for the report, and it is a nice outline. I know through just being around. I suppose looking at the before and after negotiation slides that you have shown us, there is no doubt in my mind that a pitched roof is considerably less unattractive than a flat roof. The original designers kind of looked like a shed, rather. Uninteresting, probably, but you go back to the numbers and things. But I look at that and I look at the scale of that. And Given that this is a site which is about employment and it looks as though we're looking at a change of use from employment and there being an assessment having been made that the fact that there will be people employed here to look after residents, that justifies that change of use. But I look at that and it looks awfully industrial. Now I know that, you know, planning is, I mean, design is subjective, but as was mentioned by the chair, there are some guidelines about effectively, I suppose, the livability of space. And I have to say, I have quite some experience of visiting a number of different care homes from various different relatives in my time. And certainly there are some residents for whom access to a balcony is maybe quite, potentially there may be some dangers for some residents, but there are many for whom the additional livability of having that immediate outside space as a balcony is a really good thing. I look at that and I suppose I'm looking at the section of the report on, sorry, bring it up again, on page 55 of the report, and particularly the section on the design and visual impacts. And thank you for including the policies ST04 and DM04 set out the local development plan's key primary principles of design, whereby development must respect its context, promote or reinforce local distinctiveness, and take opportunities to improve the character and quality of an area. And then further, it states that policy DM04 is reinforced by policy BE1 of the BPNP, although that's the name of the plan, so we're ignoring that. You've given us that guidance, thank you. But then further, I go on to the second paragraph of that section that says paragraph 131 of the NPPF states that good design is fundamental to what planning should achieve, and that paragraph 135 of the NPPF states that development should add to the overall quality of an area and be sympathetic to the local character surrounding the built environment and landscape setting. So those are identified there, and the argument goes on about actually how those policies have been applied to this particular application. I think I maybe would take a slightly different judgment that the planning officer has taken, and it concerns me that we have frankly, it's a massive building, absolutely massive building, next to a bit of public open space, but it seems to rely on public open space to make it more livable. It just looks like a giant wall of high, you know, it's flat faced, it's high, it's got a bit of colour in there, but it's pretty boring. And I wonder about the livability of it. It is concerning to me, and particularly with regard to the guide for care homes that you just mentioned, Jen. And actually, I hear what the officer said about parking standards taken from the 1990s. I think we've all seen and we all know that there's a considerable increase in the car usage, but we have to go on your advice on that. I really struggle to think that the advice or the lack of guidance doesn't help. But I remain quite concerned about once this is a sustainable location for people who do want to walk, cycle, or take the bus. I mean, it's great from that perspective. But this is for a large number of people, and I worry about the impact on local residents of the additional parking that my expectation is that will be generated by this if approved. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So raising some concerns in terms of that second paragraph under the section on design and visual impacts. It's this good design, isn't it? And good to some people is not good for other people. Clearly they've worked at the design. I don't think there's any doubt about that, and there has been improvements. And the visuals are precisely that, visuals. wonder, yeah, does anyone else want to add anything on that, or do you want to come back? Councillor Knight?
That's the problem with, this aesthetics, isn't it? More subjective interpretation of an image like that. I don't have a problem with it at all in terms of what it looks like for me, and certainly I'm sure that Mr. Hill would not agree with me, and I appreciate his very clear and thorough references, but nonetheless, he lives directly opposite. And as do many people I've talked to there, listen to, I mean, sorry. It's relatively in character with the surrounding residences. I'm mindful of the care home on Highfield Road in Norfolk as you go up on it right there. It's similar to that. It was actually similar, huge and totally out of character to the surrounding area, social housing and Victorian buildings. But there it is. Aesthetically, subjectively, that's where we're at.
You know, I think
Undecided.
I think councillor Lane, it's quite interesting in terms of it being this transition between the residential and the commercial, because the new housing could theoretically look at a blank clad facade with an eaves height of 8.5 metres. That would be a normal kind of shed situation. So from those houses, from that, the houses opposite the east, I think they'd much rather look at a 3-storey residential home than they would the rear of a big commercial building. Yeah, and then so if you come back and then we've got councillor Lane and then we'll move to the vote, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to quickly add that something that's going to be quite important is how it's executed. You know, we're looking at the montages now, and you know we can all see that there has been significant improvement in the design through the planning process. But I'd also like to point out that I have added a condition to the consent requiring the submission of material details. You know, just to make sure that the way that this is built out doesn't give us any nasty surprises further down the line.
Yeah, no, I think that's welcomed. Thank you very much. And there'll be nothing to prevent further amendments to the drawings if they did choose the balconies were the correct approach. Councillor Lane.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, at the end of the day, we can only look at what's in front of us, and I actually know that development is subjective, but this is close to residential dwellings, and I'm sure the people who live close in the residential dwellings will prefer to see that, like suggested, this as opposed to industrial units. So I think it's a move in the right direction. I would have concerns about the safety aspects with balconies on this building, especially with elderly people. So I'm quite happy, Councillor Mike, you said the layout as it stands. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much for that debate. Don't see any other houses, so we have a Lynn Lane moving the officer's recommendation, seconded by Councillor Leatherby, which is approval subject to the legal agreement. So I'll ask for all in favour of that, please.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Chair.
And those against?
1, 2.
And abstentions? So that's carried and approved. Thank you. We are just on course to 12. I think we'll probably have time for a break before we move into the next applications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Or we will call you back, I should say. So application 80168, land west of Lane, King Martin.
Thank you, Chair. So the application is retrospective to the erection of a timber frame shelter to create 3 undercover bays. A verbal update, I'd like to let members know that there was an error in one of the plan numbers. It should be numbered 407101 rather than 407100. So the location of the site, as I said, it's a retrospective application. The red line here is drawn around a timber frame shelter attached to an existing barn. The aerial location here shows that it's located north of Castle Street, Coombe Martin. It's accessed by a Bowhay Lane from Comer's Lane. There's residential properties to the south, and the site forms part of a 2-acre holding and is fronted by an area of yard. The constraints map here shows this relationship to the assessment boundary of Coombe Martin, which is shown in black, and also shows the nearby conservation area, the red line, which is just to the west of the sites. So here is an image of the shelter in question. The site plan showing the 3 bays, existing shed, 3 bays marked in yellow. Here we have elevations. You can see it's a continuation of the existing sheds on the site. So in terms of the assessment, as I've shown, it's outside of the development boundary, and the applicant has indicated it's actually for personal use. So as far as compliance with policy SPD 074, which relates to development in a countryside location, it isn't strictly in accordance with it. It doesn't respond to a specific local or economic need. However, officers are mindful that it is adjacent to the assessment boundary. It's attached to existing sheds. It's a very lightweight, open-sided structure with pretty minimal visual impacts. And it has also been indicated by the applicant that it is also used in association with the equine use of the site. A family member keeps a horse there. So there is a degree of relevance to our policies assessing equine development. The development isn't considered to have any impact on the adjacent conservation area. It's located on the opposite side of the barn, and as I pointed out, it is a lightweight structure. It's open-sided. The site is located within the North Devon Coast National Landscape. But again, in the context of the site, existing development, the sort of other development also in the west of the site where a barn has been converted to residential use, there aren't considered to be any significantly harmful visual impacts in this case. Environmental health have been consulted and they've requested the use of the condition to ensure that it isn't used for commercial use to protect the amenities of neighbouring properties to the south. The application is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We don't have any wish to speak. So, any questions, members? No? You have a question, Councillor? Comments next then. So no questions, we'll comment and debate.
If I want to make Chairman and see that you got condition. So, want to comment?
Anyway, there. Only comment on it is, I see you've got condition 3, no lighting shall be installed or within the structure area by room, which I can understand. But then all we're going to do is have a 500 watt light on the existing building and shine it across. So, I mean, it's a bit difficult to put a condition like that on it. Wouldn't be able to really any better sentence. If you can ask him for that, that's exactly what they would do, a higher voltage light shining into there. So, you know, what's your comments on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. You know, all we can really do is control the development in question here. The adjacent barn has been there for some time. There were no conditions restricting lighting in that instance. So, you know, we are where we are, and the condition applies to the development in question.
Councillor Knight.
Thank you, Chair. Subject to the environmental health condition, which obviously is an understandable one, judging by the photograph, and with approval.
Thank you. That's seconded by Councillor Adams. Does anyone have anything else to add? Okay, we'll vote on that then. All in favour? It's everyone. Thank you. If you can kindly bring it back in. How many more have you got today?
That's right.
David, you've done really well.
Thank you very much.
That's great.
This next one.
You're doing the rest, Matt.
Yeah. Will be, sorry. I have only figured this one. That's an out.
Thank you. Thank you. So Councillor Beaver has left, so application. Item 8, application 80748, temporary hoarding, land adjacent to One Bridge Chambers. And just to remind you that the previous application was at committee because of strength again. Councillor, and the next three, I believe, are in the ownership of the council. Yeah. So over to you when you're ready.
Thank you, Chair. As you quite rightly said, this application is before you because it is on council land. And what we're looking at is application 80748, citing of 4 adverts on a temporary hoarding which exists on the Strand at the moment surrounding a construction site. So if I take you through this application, what you're looking at here is a location plan, and you have the Strand running along the north-east of the site, in our application site there to the indicated in the red edge. Taking that forward and putting that in a context for you in terms of aerial photography. Some of you remember the fountain we used to have here in front of the building. It's now currently surrounded by a hoarding because works are going on at this site to bring the building back into a more community focused use. Members will remember considering that application a number of months ago, which was to do with providing an outside space and bringing the building as a whole back into a community use. So what we're looking at now is the provision of some signage on that hoarding which you saw around the building. It will include the details there showing the promoters of the project, and then putting that in a context for you, showing on the right hand side of that hoarding. Obviously, in terms of adverts, the main thing that we have to look at here is amenity and highway safety, somewhat different to a normal planning application. So we can only concern amenity, and bringing that background here, obviously in a heritage-rich locality. However, we need to then look at that in the round, whereby your conservation officer has provided a comment which has been received since the agenda was published, and in that she has confirmed that she does not consider that this proposal will harm the significance of the heritage asset. In terms of the scheme as well, it will only be for a temporary period while the construction works are ongoing, and it is part of a wider initiative in the town to bring back in use heritage assets. So members, therefore, in terms of this application, we consider that the amenity impacts are acceptable, and we have a sort of nod back to our top-front design policies in the local plan. Therefore, we're looking at an approval of this application for a temporary period, whether that be 12 months or the completion of the building works, whichever is sooner. And there is the conditions set out for you on page 101 and 102 of your agenda. Thank you, Chair.
Are you happy with the drawing numbers? There's no amendments. As far as we're aware.
Okay.
Okay, members, any questions on that? Councillor Nye?
Ricky? Can't see from the photograph, but actually, what has happened or what is happening to the ill-fated fountain?
I can ask, I can let you know outside the meeting.
Because it's got subterranean secrets, hasn't it? Okay. Sure, never know.
Okay. Councillor Lane and then Councillor Walker.
You need put any more than what you've got shown on the hoarding now.
Which bit, sorry, Councillor Lane?
You go back. You have the hoarding shown on the pictures on it there. Can you put any more advertising signs than what they've got shown in there? Because in condition 7 it says order for to be seen. That's from which to be seen. So, I mean, doing this, there's any more advertising than what they've got shown, or like, okay.
No, it's those four there we're looking at. These other ones would most likely be what's called deemed consent for the builder. So you've got site safety and then Pierce Construction. So they'll make a deemed consent outside of our need for.
So is that forward to the right then, is it?
It's those blue ones on the right we're looking at.
Okay.
Four on the right.
Is that councillor?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, no problem, thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Walker.
Something up for the moment.
Then may I have a movement?
May I have a comment? Put my question.
There's a comment.
Please.
Well, thank you. Here's my personal anecdotal comment. I am so thrilled about the development as you referred to this heritage area, but particularly that area, because it was in a sense, it was blocked by the fountain. And as a former trustee of the British Chambers and a former trustee of SOL, I think I was one of the first to be allowed in through the locked doors into that great hall, which is now, I'm so excited by it. So
They let you out.
in chains. So that's a preamble to the approval for you, Chair.
Councillor Walker.
Yeah, I'd like to second the approval, and I think actually it's a really good thing that is being done, because some people know what's happening there and that it's part of the bigger regeneration scheme within Dunstable.
Yeah, good point. Okay, so we'll move very much to that. Recommended for approval, all in favour? Everyone, that's great. So next, 80703, we'll bring in Councillor Lever. 2 seconds.
Yeah.
One. Yeah, no, no, yeah,
Yeah, supported the proposal. The funny word, well,
I know,
Yeah.
I wish it wasn't like that. It's just look,
the review.
yeah, on an application.
Mm,
It was actually in favour.
yeah, yeah, because we kind of, we don't get any comment about, yeah. We would know that.
Okay, so application 80703, watering hole, watering the Parsons Street, Barnstaple.
Thank you, Chair. Quite right, you say this application relates to a watering hole near to Linton House in Barnstaple. This application is before you because it is on council-owned land and building. Members will recall considering the original application on this site back in May, where members resolved to grant approval for the conversion of the building to a women's community centre and hub. That was subject to a number of conditions, and it's today that the applicant wishes to vary one of those conditions. So I'll just remind members where the application site is. So we're looking at the former watering hole next to the telephone exchange in Barnstaple and opposite the former railway station. So taking that forward, members, Cattle Market car park, of course, Castle Mound, telephone exchange, and the former railway station on our application site. It's there in the centre. And again, just showing you some contextual photographs to remind you what you were looking at previously. So in terms of this application, members, the applicant is looking to be able to use the premises for longer hours than previously approved. They now want to use it 7 days a week up until 11 o'clock at night. So in terms of this application, we're not looking at the principle of the development. We're purely looking at the merits of varying this condition and the associated policies that will impact that variation of that condition. So in terms of this application, we are looking to extend those opening hours, which there was concern with initially, but as part of this application, we've been provided with a noise management plan, which is set out for you on page 113 of your agenda. Most importantly, the Environmental Health Officer has considered this for you, and on the basis of the information in there, the Environmental Health Officer has considered that the scheme is acceptable, and that would be subject to a planning condition being imposed to make sure that it is operated in accordance with that noise management plan. Obviously, there is residential properties to the east of this site and quite some distance across the road to the south. So I think we're in a position here where we can understand that it is slightly remote from residential properties, but this noise management plan has given us the confidence that the scheme would be acceptable from an amenity point of view. But what we do also have to think about here is flood risk. We are in an area of flood risk, and this was considered as part of the original application, where we were going from a public house, which is obviously quite vulnerable, to something which was reducing the number of bedrooms on site and something which potentially less risk, because people obviously are not intoxicated and are able to make their informed decisions of how to act in a flood event. So whilst we're extending the opening hours as part of this, we don't think it's going to be unreasonably put more people at risk as a result of that in terms of flood management, because we would still require the submission of an emergency plan which will be used in the event of flooding. So members, I think we're in a position here where we are looking to recommend approval of the application, subject to the conditions set out for you there on your agenda report. On page 118 is the relevant condition revision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Question, any questions first? The question, councillor Lever, because we have one from councillor Knight, if you're listening. Thank you.
Yes, is there a cellar? That's my question, thank you. Is there a cellar? Because most pubs have a cellar, in which case in terms of flooding, that might be relevant. I can't see any sign of a cellar in the or basement.
Is there a cellar in the building?
Cellar. I'm not aware, the plans haven't shown that, and I think originally the drum, what do you call it, kegs, were kept in an outhouse at the back, so.
Used to be like the man who knows.
I thought you were going to say you've been down the cellar. They let you out of that one as well. Councillor Lever.
Thank you. I think actually having a variation of this sort, suggesting that they can have permission for longer opening hours, actually is a testament to the need of a space for women in Barnstable, a safe space. And actually, as it has been a pub previously, which has had, I know, some reputation, but I know that's not a material concern, and it's driven. But I would suggest that I can see absolutely no reason why not welcome this. And I would like to move approval in line with the officer recommendation.
Thank you. I think councillor Maddox, you had a discussion there. Did you have anything further to add? I mean, I recall that we didn't wholeheartedly support the first application, and I think we'll, as you say, councillor Lever, if there's a need for this, then it's a great thing. Well, it wasn't a great thing that there's a need for it, but you know what I mean. Okay, so we'll take a vote on that then. All in favour? Thank you, that's unanimous. So item 10, application 80349, Museum of Barnstable, North Devon Square. Steam building consent for alteration, existing storeroom, and a door and a new door.
Thank you, Chair. You saved me describing this one in too much detail. However, just to remind members, this application is before us because the building is owned by North Devon District Council. And the Museum of North Devon, as I'm sure you're all aware, is on the square in Barnstable, as delineated by the red edge on the location plan. And again, just putting that in context for you with an aerial photograph and reminding you of the exterior of the building. So what we're looking at here is the first floor level of the museum. On the left is the recent extension to the building, and members may be aware as you come up the stairs in the museum, you're confronted with a stained glass window, and it's this room in behind here, which members may not have been in before because it's not currently open, is the one that we're looking at. So I've not got a pointer on. Okay. So yeah, it's this building in here at the top of the stairs that we're looking at. So if we move that forward in terms of the sectional plans, at the moment, I'm looking in section, we have a storeroom here in sort of a middle no man's land, shall we say, and then another storeroom up here, which we want to bring back into use. So as part of that, the application seeks to lower the floor slightly to bring it in line with the existing floor levels. And because this is a listed building, we need consent to remove those timbers to facilitate the use. And obviously in terms of this application, it is being facilitated to bring that room so it can be used for display. So I think we can see the public benefit of this application. That's the key when looking at listed building applications, is to ensure that we're looking at the public benefit that will result from such schemes if we are interfering with that historic fabric. So as set out in your agenda report there, members, the Conservation Officer has received some further information on the consideration of this application, which clarifies the age of the timbers we're looking at removing. And that has therefore enabled her to come forward to the view that the scheme would be acceptable, subject to an appropriate condition being imposed to make sure that we record those timbers that are there. So that can form part of the record of the building going forward, and we have a nod to that available for those who wish to research it. So that's the important thing when looking at heritage assets. Remember, as set out in the NPPF, we need to look at that public benefit. And we're in a position here, yes, we are interfering with historic fabric, but it's an intervention that will bring that room into public use. It will maintain the longevity of that building, enable members of the public to visit that room. So I think, members, as set out in your agenda report, there is a resolution to grant listed buildings consent, subject to a number of conditions, and one of those being that we have a recording schedule in place for those timbers that have to be impacted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Are you moving or are you letting me any questions, Councillor Lever? Moving.
Thank you, Chair. I'd actually like to, I'd like to move the recommendation in line with the officer. Yeah, I'd like to move approval in line with the officer recommendation, but I'd also like to comment that the extension to the museum has, in my own humble opinion, been a huge success, and the footfall in the museum has been tremendous, and they've been successful in getting some really fantastic exhibitions and nationally acclaimed pieces for people to see, and that the particular benefit of this is that part of the public benefit is in having exhibition space where it's not open to natural light. So this being within the building means that they will have an extension of a space they can use for exhibits, which are potentially more vulnerable to light. So absolutely fantastic, and well done to the team for the success that the museum is. And if you've not been, please do go ahead and have a look, as was mentioned at full council last week. So another cafe's great, yeah, thank you. So yeah, absolutely in support of approval of this.
Councillor Maddox, are you looking to second that? Yep. Yeah. Councillor Lane?
Am I assuming they're going to reuse the existing floor joist and flooring to replace, with a lower gun?
I'm not 100% clear on that, Chair. Because we're photographing, recording, I think there is a need to strengthen the existing, so I'm not convinced they will be reusing.
Well, if we try to retain, is it possible to try to retain the existing, they can reinforce it, but is it possible to try to retain the existing floor joist, floor seat, not running straight through, anyways, which you should be, or we step beside each other, and the floor in itself. Because thank you.
Yeah, quite clear, Darling, that was informative. If the committee wish to.
Also, somebody did go on board of them, happy to propose it, thank you.
Let's ask the mover, Councillor Levy. Are you happy for that to be on as an informative?
As an informative, so not a condition of approval, so yes.
Councillor Maddox? Yeah. I'm sure our conservation officer will want to see the loss of the least amount of historic fabric as possible. So, okay, so we'll take a vote. All in favour? So maybe, thank you. Still Chairman. Okay. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Brown. That moves us on to item 11, which is the appeals report, which is a new report, not last month's. I understand.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do September's because you remember last month it was a very. I'm going to start with September's planning appeals because you may remember it was a very, very long committee and I think we'd all lost the will to live. So you wouldn't want me to come through.
I think it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah.
You can go away. That just we can hear you much better when it's closer.
Okay.
And you just talk more.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So 3 appeals There's 3, isn't there, for September.
You just move it to the top, if you,
Yeah.
it's really hard to hit, if it's really close. 'cause-
Is that better?
Yeah, always,
Okay.
always.
So the first planning appeal, I think Bev sent it to you yesterday, just to remind you of September's, because I'm sure you don't remember what was on September's appeal decisions. So the first one, so they were all dismissed. First one was an application for outline planning permission for the erection of one local needs dwelling. So the application was land adjacent to Blakehall Mill Farm in Muddyford. So this was dismissed as the erection of a local needs dwelling. So as we sort of went through in September, the proposal was located in the countryside where development was limited to meet local economic and social need, rural rebuilding and development where it's necessarily restricted to a countryside location. So I think we went through some of the housing policies on the start of September Planning Committee for dwellings in the countryside. So this really re-emphasises that spatial strategy set out in policy STO 74, particularly in terms of the open countryside. The proposal was also refused in regards to the open rural landscape and not responding to that rural setting in terms of policy STO4 and DMO4, that visual impact. There was a highway reason that PINS did not consider would be conflicting. So in terms of that planning balance, there was conflict with the locational policy set out in our local plan in terms of housing, where housing should be located. And there would be an adverse on the landscape. So the harm significantly and demonstrably outweighed the moderate benefit of that one dwelling. So that again was really useful. I think it's how we've been certainly presenting applications for houses, particularly single houses in the countryside. So that sort of reconfirms that approach. The next application is for an erection of a dwelling in the garden of 35A, the Britons, I think it's Braunton. So the application site you can see is quite a small garden area. If I can resist it, that isn't finished. So there is already a dwelling in the site, see in blue, and there's a small garden area where they wanted to put another dwelling. So obviously the application was within the development boundary, but you can see it's a very narrow part of land, and the proposal would represent open development of the site. So the PINS accepted that recommendation for refusal, or that refusal, in terms of that wider impact, the harmful effect on the character and appearance of the area, and conflict policy SDO4 and DMO4. I think what's interesting in this appeal decision, there was a lot of support, and there appears to be a family connection that needs the new dwelling. But PINS are really clear that this can only be afforded in limited weight, and the level of social sort of local support for a proposal is not a reason for unacceptable development. So I think that is something kind of to learn also from that. You know, that we obviously get that there's a lot of support, but sometimes that doesn't mean the development is acceptable. So an interesting one. So the next one, Councillor Whitehead's not here, but she'd be very familiar with this one in terms of Chiddlehampton. So it's a retrospective application for the change of use of land for open storage bays, basically with a concrete batching business in Greendown Farm, Chiddlehampton. So the appeal site is in the open countryside. There was great conflict in terms of the location of this type of business being located in the countryside, and conflict with the local plan. Obviously, we would normally expect these types of businesses to be located on par fields or industrial estate on the edge of Barnstable. So there was some conflict with the location of it. They were trying to sort of say that it was a farm biodiversification scheme, which in terms of policy SDN 15, but that wasn't accepted. And there was other things in terms of highway reasons for refusal in terms of those HGVs, and there was also a noise assessment where they felt there was a significant impact on the neighbours of the nearby properties. So I think that it's not just a suitable location, I think, and there's harmful effects on living conditions. I think the frustration with this one was it was a really successful business, but just not in the right location. So we have actually observed an enforcement notice now. So we have given them 9 months to relocate. We will see what happens to that one. And then we've got one from this month. Matt, you might be more better placed than me. Do you want to have a chat about this one?
Is that as a bug?
No, it's in Matt's area.
It's kind of my own, I didn't
Actually do, I didn't actually deal with the application, but yeah, what you're looking at, there was an appeal where they were looking to convert the building and extend it upwards. Obviously this site is in Broughton. It's a narrow road approaching it and go behind it. You see there's dwellings behind, there's a road behind there in between those dwellings and this application site. But what is interesting with this one was it's in the Broughton neighbourhood plan and obviously the North Devon local plan. So we're able to apply those policies to it. And what we went down the route of was basically the development occurring here is not appropriate in its location, resulting in impact on the street scene, resulting in amenity impacts to the neighbours. Whilst the inspector didn't fully support us on the amenity in terms of privacy, in terms of that building to the right there, and you see sort of cable windows to the right there, they did sort of acknowledge or did fully acknowledge the impact on the street scene of the development. You do a mortgage shop out into that road, there was no parking realistically available, so all double yellows, you're right on that road junction. So yeah, the inspector upheld us on that, and I think that's a good decision. Coupled with that one you saw a minute ago, the Britons, that's really brought home how development has to be appropriate in Broughton and wider areas and apply those policies.
Thank you very much for that. I think that's very useful. Any questions on those? So all dismissed.
Yeah, no, it's good result.
Councillor Lane?
Are we going to run through something every time before the meeting, or I mean, I missed something today?
So the planning appeals, I always run through at the end.
I'm on a beach.
But can you remember the training? I did a 5-year housing land supply bite-sized training before. We were looking at different topics or subjects that you would like me to do just for a quarter of an hour or half an hour before planning committee, rather than sort of formal day training.
Yeah, we're still on in committee at the moment, so let's, yeah. So that any more questions on the appeal report? Otherwise, thank you very much again. And item 12 is to consider any planning site inspections. I'm not aware of any. No. Okay, so we'll close the meeting there, and Councillor Lane, if you, I can give you some